I got really excited when this deal came across my search queue. $47,000 for the deal. Check. It's within our budget. It's an 18-year-old business. Check. It's weathered the test of time. It's a pack and ship plus P.O. boxes business. Check. It's recession resistant with subscription revenue. Sounds good. Occupancy of the 480 P.O. boxes reached 380. So there's room for growth. Check. We can immediately target some growth objectives. It's in Colorado. Check. That's where we want to invest. The seller is trying to retire. Check. It's a win-win for both parties. It has an appealing storefront with a 5-year extension available on the lease. Check. Stable property, good part of town. There is limited competition within 30 miles. Check. It's not a franchise. Check. We want the flexibility to scale, and these types of businesses are typically franchises, which presents the optics of high barriers to entry for prospectors. They have an existing general manager. Check. I can come in for a couple of months to learn the business, but then start stepping back to a few hours of check-ins per week. And the best part, 90% seller financing. So we can put 10% cash down, or $4,700, and finance through the seller at 0% interest the other $42,300 over the next 2 years. So it hit all of the big checks. It's within our budget. It's older than 5 years. It's a recession-resistant business. The seller is retiring. It's in a geography we want. It has stable property. There's existing management in place. There's minimal competition, and it's not a franchise. That's pretty much in our model that we're looking for. May not be everyone's model, but it's ours. So this felt like a no-brainer. I submitted an LOI immediately to lock in interest with the seller, and I hit the road for 15 hours to go look at the site in person. I've been in Colorado for about 30 minutes. I'm screaming north, about 3 hours away from the prospect site. But that is when more information began to leak out. And once I stepped into the store and spoke with the GM, I found out the real story. There we got front doors and P.O. boxes, more boxes, 480 boxes. Everything is disassembled. House is owned by the franchise. This front reception. He said this used to be 4 times the amount of packages. It's the rear loading stations, master keys, reception area. All of this space can be rebuilt out. These cabinets were up on these walls. This stuff is just junk except for the UPS boxes or USPS. The Xerox printer is a lease that will go back. Just bathrooms, wet closet. It's definitely just a skeleton right now. Okay, this area was all where they would do the packing. There was something against that wall, countertops. There was an island here for a packing station, manager's office, telecom demarc. I think the whole thing here is 1,700 squares. Cosmetic kind of stuff happening here. Paint on the walls, beautification.
Antiquated. So if you were using that in the UPS store, and you broke down and you tried to call technical support, they would not be able to help.
Okay.
That's all destined on the land for key.
Okay, so we just need a whole new technology system.
Correct.
Okay. Here's the scoop. This used to be a franchise, but the seller fell 6 months behind in paying his franchise royalties last year. The franchisor placed them on a repayment and restructuring plan. He owned multiple stores and was being forced to sell off 2 of them while repaying royalties on the others. For this store, it was on a repayment plan, and the owner was making progress on that front, but as part of the restructuring agreement, He had to have the other stores under contract to sell by a certain date. Yet, when that date hit, he was still 2 months behind on the 6 months that he owed for royalty payments. And while there was buyer's interest in the other two stores, nothing was locked in. So the franchisor pulled the plug. They set a date, and on that date, a team arrived to de-identify the store. What this meant? They removed all signage and branding. They cut off access to the fulfillment software. They removed all packing and shipping supply inventory. They dismantled and repossessed any proprietary FF&E that belonged to the franchise. The franchisor notified all existing customers to move their business to the other nearest franchise locations. By the time they were done, the store was an empty shell with only the P.O. boxes and some cabinetry remaining. And of the 380 original P.O. box customers, over 200 of them had already moved their business elsewhere. The remaining 100 or so had not received the notice, or they lived out of town and only checked their mail intermittently. So it was only a matter of time. I had to take a long pause.
Well, so we actually do like the general manager. He's a good guy. He manages 4 of these stores, and it's not for his lack of management that they're going under and losing their franchise deals. It's the current owner defaulted on franchise payments and got behind by 6 months last year. They put him on a payment plan, and he was actually working well to get caught up, but the franchise put sort of this arbitrary deadline on it, and he had paid back 4 of the 6 months and was on track to sell 2 of the stores as also part of their restructuring agreement. And so he was under contract for 2 stores, started making payments back to get on the right track, but the franchise said, nope, your deadline is this. And sure enough, on that deadline, they sent a crew of people to perform de-identification of the property, meaning they come in and start ripping out everything that is branded. So this mailbox store is now a $8,300 a month lease for a 1,700 square foot space that has some P.O. boxes and a bunch of junk in it. The question is, do I bite on the sales price of $47,000, only needing to put down 10% with seller financing of the other 90%, and try to resurrect this thing? There were some positive signs that the local community does want this place back in business, and there would be some of that support immediately coming back. But given the state of the interior, it's going to take a lot more than some paint and a fresh mopping. I'll have to procure a brand new technology platform. So we're talking accounting, payroll, then all of the shipping software and receiving software that pack and ship companies use. We'll have to integrate your major vendors, your brown box trucks, and get on their delivery route. We'll have to honor existing mailbox lease agreements, and try to rapidly bring back those that have shown attrition. Hopefully they haven't signed longer agreements with their new provider, 3, 6, 9 month agreements and year agreements are standard. Hopefully they've only gone 3 months. So the immediate cash flow opportunity is in the mailboxes and salvaging those customers. I don't know how many there are, maybe 100. And then pack and ship, which constituted roughly 60% of the business, I'm going to need to invest in a ton of equipment, software for that. Most of the existing employees have gone off to get new jobs. This general manager, we like him, but he's using this as an opportunity to retire. There are 2 other managers possibly available, but that's to be determined. So a lot of decisions to make. The transaction cost itself is attractive. 47 grand. It's like buying a car, call it a used luxury car, and you're not really sure what's under the hood. And so you can take that risk, particularly if you're only putting 10% down on that. That is not a lot of out-of-pocket expense. But that $8,300 lease is prohibitive at the outset. I'll have to go out of pocket at the beginning, probably for the first 3 months to figure that out. Replacing the GM salary and cutting some of the contract labor they had, we would lean this thing down to a 3-person operation, me plus those 2 managers. So it'd be pretty lean from that perspective of payroll. But the place is also, it needs some polishing. I'd have to engage with the local community very rapidly. Chamber of Commerce, local stomping grounds, golf clubs, whoever the locals are, get them involved, get their feedback, take my loyal customers, whoever is still there, survey them, see what they'd like to see from this place. It's certainly a turnaround, and I don't know the maximum upside of this thing because since this was a franchise, all of the financials weren't readily available. So, but there is the seller calling me. I'm gonna take that call and we'll see how this goes. Whole lot of bugs on the windshield. I am driving back home and I've decided to kill the deal. So lesson learned for me. Got a little over my skis in that little ski resort town, but it's for the best. I do work on the fringe of risk plays in evaluating these deals. I'm not opposed to stepping outside the box and trying something new, trying something a little risky, but this one was just a little too much.
Here were my takeaways. The financials. Since this was a franchise, the seller was under confidentiality agreements, which hindered his ability to share the historical financials. Why? Because franchises are federally regulated, and federal law does not allow them to share specific storefront P&Ls to even their own potential buyers. Instead, they're able to publish what's called an FDD, or a franchise disclosure document, which can give some broad swooping financials for buyers to consider, but it is still a bit limited in what can be analyzed. Well, they pulled the plug on his franchise agreement, so couldn't he share, you might ask? The answer is yes, probably, but he still didn't want to cause any more legal mess than he was already in, and I can respect that. And this thing has been around for 18 years, so it must be pulling some sort of revenue to cover the bills and give the seller a financial life, right? Okay, fair enough. What else? The remaining customers. They were very loyal and really wanted the business to work out for the community, especially because the nearest other similar P.O. Box host that had capacity was over 30 miles away and wasn't accessible in the winter snowfalls. So if I could salvage at least those 100 customers at an average of $50 per P.O. Box per month, I would at least have an initial recurring revenue of $5,000 per month to help start us up. and that would take minimal labor. But the doors closed 3 weeks ago. Time was becoming the enemy, the landlord. The seller's rep mentioned that the landlord was grumpy. I suppose I would be too if my tenant defaulted on their business. But here you have a new buyer who wants to save the business. So voila, problem solved, right? Nope. Most commercial landlords want to see financial stability of their tenants. How do you prove financial stability? You show the previous 3 years of P&Ls or franchise, disclosure documentation, something to substantiate legitimacy of your business. Well, in our case, this is our first venture, so we don't have that. This would be an uphill battle to negotiate. The lease. Even if we could sweet talk our way into the lease, it was $8,300 per month. That's nearly $100,000 a year in rent alone. I was only given a very vague potential revenue for the branch. Let's say that, given the feedback from the GM, that 60% of revenue was from packing and shipping, and 40% was from the P.O. boxes. If we had full occupancy of the boxes at an average of $50 per box per month, that would pull in $288,000 per year in revenue. And if the other 60% of revenue was pack and ship, that would have been another $432,000 for a total annual revenue of $720,000 per year. That's pretty good for a $47,000 buy-in, especially amortized over 2 years on the seller's note at 0% interest. That would put the lease at around 13% of revenue, which is still a little high, but it's doable. However, time is the enemy here. Could I realistically gain that business back in enough time to begin paying rent immediately? No. Could I do it in 3 months? Maybe. But that means I would be cash flowing out of pocket 3 months of lease minimum, or nearly $25,000. This was starting to look very expensive. Okay, well, so we can shift this to an independently owned and operated business, right? Can't we? The branding. In addition to just paying for the lease, I would also need to reinvest in a new brand identity, and I would need to build brand recognition through new signage, advertisements, marketing efforts, and the signage on the brick and mortar. These new electrified signs for these types of establishments can easily run in the tens of thousands of dollars range. Call it 10,000 to begin with. And I would need to spruce up the interior because with everything off of the walls and cabinetry disassembled and strewn everywhere, the place needed an overhaul. You don't want to open a brand new store and have it looking like a gutted out repossession. Even if you have loyal customers who know what the situation is, you're setting a bad precedent for any new customers, and you're exhibiting your new brand in a very dirty pawn shop looking way. No offense to pawn shop owners. The software. Okay, so what else did the franchisor take back? Perhaps the most precarious and costly piece of IP it provided? The fulfillment software. These chain stores already have a plug-and-play like software package that already has the capabilities of CRM, receiving inventory, shipping products, integrating point-of-sale systems, scanners, so barcodes and QR codes. They have the ability to select carriers with rates and lead times and dynamic pricing. And oh, by the way, they've already negotiated all of that with those carriers. They've gotten to be on their vendor lists or vice versa. They've got APIs embedded in the software that integrate to your timekeeping, payroll, accounting systems. One should not underestimate the value of this type of system, as well as the time it would take to try and build it from scratch. Even taking an off-the-shelf system, and there are several out there, the implementation would be costly. There would still be some level of customization, and I would still need to purchase and integrate the timekeeping, payroll, and CRM and accounting softwares so that everything clicked. When I realized this, the bigger picture began to become very clear. But there's one last piece that could potentially salvage this thing: the existing management. The GM had been there for 6 years. He managed all 4 stores. Now, some might argue, well, he allowed them to default their royalty payments to the franchisor, right? Actually, wrong. The owner had kept the GM out of the financial picture. He was truly an operations-only GM. His job was to recruit, hire, train, and schedule the staff, and to keep customers happy. And in speaking with him, I had no reason to doubt that he didn't do just that. He seemed legit, a very calm demeanor, mature adult at the helm. So I thought, well, if anyone can help me salvage this thing, it's him. And so I asked him, would you be willing to onboard with me and help me get this thing back up and running? His answer, in short, was no. He was taking this entire dilemma as a sign that it was time for him to retire. He mentioned that he might stick around for a couple of months to help, but the surety of his answer was not compelling. It felt like he was just placating a bit because it was an uncomfortable situation. His real answer was in the body language and the things he wasn't saying. Things you can only get in person. With all of these factors, I realized that the $47,000 price tag was going to turn into at least $100,000 cash up front project. Just a bet on a loyal but dwindling customer base in a remote part of Colorado. Oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention, if you thought the lease was expensive, try affording a lodging nearby out of pocket in this little ski resort community. Just my presence in town was going to cost another $500 to $1,000 per week, depending on where I stayed. I looked up the nearest RV park to plant my travel trailer on, but it was 36 miles away with no guarantee of available lots. That sealed the deal for me. Here were my biggest lessons learned. While franchises might have cons, such as being a corporate overlord, royalties, and inside-the-box boundaries, they also have some pros, such as brand identity and recognition, national and regional marketing, specialty software systems, and a portable customer base. Look no further than their existing customers who were able to go 30 miles away for the same service and the same price and the same expectations for quality. Number 2, you have to see the project in person before you make a decision. It is always much different in person. Number 3, you have to get to the real reason the seller is selling. I've seen excuses such as exploring new opportunities or family reasons, etc. But somewhere down deep is the real reason. I mean, think about it. If the business was making money and the owner was a passive owner with little involvement, such as this one, then why would they need to sell? The proof is in the pudding. Number 4, and lastly, there are good deals out there. There are great deals. But as the age-old saying goes, if the deal seems too good to be true, then it probably is. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned as I continue this journey. And if you are a small business owner who wants to sell, or a prospecting buyer, and you're in need of a thorough analysis of your business or the deal, reach out to me. I can help implement systems to make your sale more attractive to potential buyers, and I can help build plans to make your upcoming acquisition less risky with a healthy plan for growth. Just visit parabolic-strategy.com and drop me a note or IM me on social. My name is Richard Tannery, and until then, keep on grinding and let's go make some money.